SAP sucks. Now hold on a minute. Don't believe everything you've heard at the water cooler. Let's start with what we know. SAP shells are now available on the Tech Tree Italian cruiser line. You've probably heard the reload is atrociously long and the shells seem to shatter at every turn, so don't waste your time, right? Let's start from scratch. A SAP shell is the love child of an HE and an AP shell. It inherits the best characteristics from both parents. From armor-piercing shells, it's going to inherit the high amount of damage and the ability to smash through tons of armor. From HE shells, it is going to explode on contact with the first layer of armor it hits, regardless of range, angle, or shell velocity. It's really the best of both worlds, and once you figure out how to use these shells, they're extremely strong. Now, there's more to it than that. Yeah, we can cover that later on, but all you really want to know is, Derka, where do I shoot the enemy ships to get damage? All you have to do is shoot lightly armored sections of the ship. That's it. Avoid heavily armored sections in areas with more than one layer of armor, such as the belt and or turrets. Quite literally, anything else is free game. Bow, stern, deck, superstructure will probably be fine depending on the ship that you're shooting. You do have to memorize a couple of numbers. Amalfi. The 203mm guns, they can penetrate 55mm of armor with their SAP shells. Now we know at tier 7 you can basically pin the bow and stern of any ship at the tier. Superstructures as well. You can deal tons of damage to these areas. This does mean at longer ranges you're going to have to actually aim. It's not like an HE shell where you're just going to hope for fire. SAP shells, you're going to have to aim maybe a little bit higher towards the upper belt or the front of the ship if you're trying to hit the bow, and a little farther back if you're trying to hit the stern of the ship. Basically, just avoid the middle section of the ship in waterline shots and you'll probably do just fine. Keep an eye on saturation levels. When a section of a ship in World of Warships gets heavily damaged, it turns black. This means that there's not a lot of health points available in this area, and if you're shooting it, you're not going to get a lot of damage. In this regard, SAP is simply better than HE. And let's look at a case study to find out why. Here's a nice little Massachusetts minding his own business. Hello, sir. When moving into Brawl with him, notice I immediately target his bow, because we know it's Massachusetts, 32mm of armor, I pin 55, so this is free damage, right? You might say, well, HE can do that too, just shoot his superstructure. Maybe so, but what if his superstructure were saturated? That is where every HE spamming cruiser in the game fires at all games, so typically superstructures get saturated first. The best you could hope for is a couple thousand damage and a fire. SAP gives you the ability to tap into health pools in other sections of enemy ships. Each ship in World of Warships holds a different amount of health in various areas. Once an area is damage saturated, you're going to get minimal damage from these sections. The bow and stern sections of enemy ships harbor big pools of HP, and SAP can allow you to harvest that. Again, you may say that, in that case, switch to armor piercing and shoot the broadside, but remember, when approaching ships or firing armor piercing shells, it depends on the distance you're shooting, gun velocity, and the angle of the armor for you to deal damage with armor piercing. SAP ignores all of that, basically. It has the best penetration angles in the game. From 0 to 10 degrees, the only area your shells will auto bounce, unlike AP, which will auto bounce up to 30 degrees. So even at steep angles, you can get good, consistent damage, especially if you're moving towards an enemy or a little closer and you can target these sections, which is Amalfi's specialty, to be honest. This is a heck of a brawling cruiser and gives Hipper a run for its money. Now granted, you're not going to be setting fires, but I argue you don't need them. Once you learn where to aim with SAP, you're going to get more consistent damage rather than relying on RNG to give you fires or not. Let's look at the DPM for all tier 7 cruisers. This is Amalfi's SAP compared to all the other tier 7's HE. Notice the only ships that are beating Amalfi in DPM are light cruisers. Also remember, Amalfi is a heavy cruiser with a 16-second reload. And while we're looking at this chart, we can compare Amalfi to its HE self, and it deals nearly 70,000 more damage a minute with its SAP shells. Now, of course, this is contingent on the shells not shattering and all sorts of factors, but the same could be said for HE shells, and it just demonstrates the high damage SAP can deal when used correctly. Another thing to point out, remember when I said to shoot at sections with only one layer of armor? Well, destroyers only have one layer of armor, and the SAP shells are absolutely devastating to destroyers. It's not unheard of to completely wipe a DD off the board with a dev strike. Yes, the Italian Tech Tree cruisers, they don't have sonar or their own radar, but when they catch a DD close enough, you can absolutely decimate them. Amalfi is a free ship. You can grind towards it right now to get your grubby paws on SAP. She's really a phenomenal cruiser. If you happen to love brawling, I feel like these Italian cruisers can give the German ones a run for their money in brawls. With the exhaust smoke, the insane speed, the concealment, and the agility, these cruisers are very good to get in close, ambush, and get out. Just mind the squishy nose armor. It's a cruiser that you need to know how to use your belt armor, but that's a discussion for another time. If you found me rambling along in this video helpful at all, hit the like button. It would help get this video in front of more of the player base to help improve our game. After all, knowledge is power. Be sure to subscribe for future content, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.